Hello everyone, I'm Patrick Kennedy and this is my week 6 informative speech assignment. For this assignment I've chosen the 22nd Amendment to the United States Constitution. The reason why I've chosen this amendment is it has to do with my week 8 persuasive speech project. In order to really give you the facts on how this legislation came into existence and the feelings that are associated with it, we will have to go back to a time in our history that we ourselves did not identify as our own American nation. During the time prior to our Revolutionary War, most of the people living in the American colonies considered themselves to be Englishmen. Indeed, though the colonies governed themselves, they were subject to Parliament and the Crown as part of the British Empire. Now, the French and Indian War is a conflict that occurred prior to our Revolution and involved the New France colonies and their native allies against the English colonies and their native allies. This war drew support and the army from Great Britain itself for the American colonies. Indeed, many of our first leaders of this country served in the British Army during this conflict. After the French and Indian War was over, however, Britain had lost a lot of resources and revenue due to the conflict. Now, the main feeling in Parliament was this war was fought for the colonies, therefore it should be the colonies' responsibility to pay for the drain on the empire's resources. Thus, taxes and tariffs in the colonies were drastically raised. U.S. Department of State, 2015. Now, the British parliamentary system is much like our own congressional. That is, a system of representation. And the colonies, despite repeated attempts, were not permitted to be represented in Parliament, and our pleas for fair and equitable treatment by the Empire were ignored. This, in a nutshell, was the catalyst for our Revolutionary War. After we had won our independence with the victory of the Revolution, our founding fathers set to the task of forming our first government. Our first president was elected, General George Washington, and he served this country through its first trials and tribulations, such as the failure of the Articles of Confederation, the drafting of the U.S. Constitution, and the addition of the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that are known as the Bill of Rights. Washington set precedents during his time as president. The three most notable are the term of Mr. President, instead of some title of nobility which others felt were befitting of such a high office. The second was the overall bearing of the president, one of strength, strong will, and prestige, but also that of a man of the people for the people. The third precedent that Washington set is the limit of 2 terms in office per president. This is the root of the 22nd Amendment. Washington had decided to step down after only 2 terms in office, though the consensus amongst our leaders was that he should remain. Washington was tired, though, and he wished to return home to his life back at Mount Vernon in Virginia. He also knew that the only way to prevent a monarchy or a dictatorship would be to ensure that the mantle of responsibility was passed on. This decision, whether intentional or not, was followed by almost every president that preceded Washington. New World Encyclopedia, 2015. There have been a few presidents in our history that have attempted to take a 3rd term in office. The first was Ulysses S. Grant in 1880, but he lost the nomination to James Garfield. The next was Grover Cleveland in 1896, but he lost the Democratic nomination to William Bryan. The third was Theodore Roosevelt in 1912, when he ran as a third-party bull moose candidate, as they coined him at the time, but lost out to Woodrow Wilson. This brings us to the final president to try to run for a 3rd term in office, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR as many know him. FDR not only ran for and won a 3rd term in office, 1940, but he also took a fourth term in office in 1944. Though his wins were largely due to his leadership during the events of the time, that is, the Great Depression and World War II, the thought of a long-term president was still considered to be against the fundamentals and ideals set down by our forefathers. Constitution Center, 2015. So in March 1947, a bill was proposed by Congress. This legislation would officially limit the terms a president could take office to 2, and would be called the 22nd Amendment to the United States Constitution. Here is how it reads. Section 1. No person shall be elected to the office of president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for no more than 2 years to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of president more than once. But this article shall not apply to any persons holding the office of president when the article was proposed by Congress, and shall not prevent any person from holding the office of president or acting as president during the term within which the article becomes operative, from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of such term. Section 2. This article shall be inoperative unless it has been ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by 3/4 of the several states within 7 years of its submission by Congress to the states. Constitution Center, 2015. After passing Congress, the 22nd Amendment was ratified by 36 out of 48 states within 4 years of its submission. That gave this legislation a clear 3/4 of the vote in the nation, and on February 7th, 1951, it passed into law. This is how and why the 22nd Amendment has come about, and thus it shall remain, as to keep with the tradition set by our first president and continued by those who followed him, for the preservation of liberty and freedom in this great nation. Thank you very much. Well, that was my week 6 presentation. Hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks a bunch, and we'll see you next week.